Look, we've talked about talent obliquely, but let's deep dive into talent. And I've got a fantastic panel here. I know you can see Ruchi's photo, but she's not here. Unfortunately, she's sick and couldn't make it. So we've got a manel here. Let's work with that. Maybe we can just start with introductions. Todd, with you, just name, rank, serial number very quickly.
Sure. My name is Todd Ferraro. I work for Verint, and I'm responsible for global operations.
Hi, Brent Kuhls, Raytheon Technologies. I run business process innovation.
Malcolm Frank, CEO of TalentGenius.
Nalin, Miglani, CEO of Actualized. But a month ago, I was CHRO of EXL, and before that, worked for many other companies.
Fantastic. All right. So before we get started, I think Great Resignation is behind us. It was 2022. It was a full 4 months ago or 5 months ago. Today, we are in this great freak out. And I think there's just massive tech layoffs, back to office mandates which aren't working, highly uncertain economic environment, banks failing. We just don't know what's really happening. It's freakish, right? Looking at the talent market. But what we are seeing is now we need to also prepare for this great LLMization, right? With generative AI coming into the picture, and we've had a lot of conversation around it. Will all these jobs around call centers, help desk, repeatable, will that all go away? What's the thing? So I think that's the premise of this session, which I want to ask all four of you gentlemen a lot about. But without that, I know it's post-lunch session, so I want to get you guys active a little bit, and maybe if we can use that Slido and start polling. Will generative AI result in a net reduction of operational jobs? Will we see job losses? Will generative AI result in net reduction of operational jobs or maybe creative jobs? Will it enrich our jobs, right? There won't be either a decrease or increase, it'll just enrich our environments. Or will it actually increase jobs, right? We've heard a lot about prompt engineers and the do's and don'ts and why we like them and don't like them. What do you guys think? We can do better with technology. It's just a www.slide.to. Who knows? Yeah, that's another one. Yeah, that's right. So it seems this room has a pretty positive picture of this thing, right? Generative AI will enrich our jobs. That's about 42%, and 1/4 of us has no clue, right? On what's going to happen. So let me, if we can go back to the slide deck. Let me ask you guys, right? You excited or scared? Maybe we'll start with you, Brent.
Excited is the easy answer. Maybe just one thought, for 6-7 years ago when we started the team, we talked about bringing technology that existed in the real world, as we called it, into our enterprise walls, within our walls. And if I look at this morning's discussion, and I'm breaking my rule because I wasn't going to talk about ChatGPT until at least the third question. But, I look at that, and that is the first opportunity for us that I see where people are going to be able to interact with technology in a way that they don't need training, right? It's going to be intuitive. It's going to guide them through it. So for that, I'm extremely optimistic at where the rest that'll follow.
So Brent is excited. Nalin, let me ask you a question, but respond in two ways, right? So one is what you just said. You were as the CHRO of EXL. Would you be excited or scared? And then in your current avatar, would you be excited or scared?
Well, I was going to actually answer that question, those two segments, and we didn't prepare, so I just want the audience to know. So now that I'm running my own company, as a capitalist, I am very excited because software development costs have fallen dramatically. Things will happen at a much faster pace, at a more cost. So whether you're excited or scared depends on where you sit. If you're a shareholder and making your income through capital, you must be very excited. But if you're an employee, you could be in one of the two segments. You could be scared or you could be excited. Those employees that are very talented and have always stayed ahead of whatever the word, in fact, are inventing AI themselves, are very excited. A whole lot of other people are feeling scared because the popular press and everybody is talking about job losses, and you can't but get affected by the zeitgeist and you can feel scared. So it's not a clear answer. Depending on which segment you are, you can be scared or excited.
Malcolm, why don't you answer it in those two ways? Malcolm didn't say that he used to run digital for Cognizant, right? So,
yeah. Having lived through these transitions now, this is the 5th time. I think I'm deeply ambivalent. I think there's going to be a lot of dislocation and short-term pain. So I think the mood in this room, not to be dismissive, but like the answers to that poll, it's sort of like folks who are about to walk the Appalachian Trail or go on a tour of Vietnam. They, they're very optimistic about it, and they haven't lived through it. Afterwards, you're going to learn some life lessons that you didn't expect. So I think we're going to see massive transition, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. That said, I am long-term highly optimistic because these are the windows where you have true innovation. These are the windows in IT services that you see leaders absolutely come bolting out of the blue. And I've been fortunate enough to have lived through that now 4 times. I think it's going to happen at a 5th. I think it's going to occur at scale. This is why I have such deep admiration for Accenture. Accenture has been continuously a curve jumper. But there are other firms that when you see these transitions, they just fall right off the league tables. We can name EDS, we can name CSC, we can go through a long, long list. And so I think that that's going to occur at a company level, and it's going to occur at an individual level. And so I think people have to have eyes wide open, ears, have a sense of humility, and really understand how you innovate your organization and innovate yourself.
So short-term pain, but long-term gain.
Correct.
Todd?
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think if you look, it's really changing the dynamic of how we engage with the customer. So when you think of a lot of our companies, right, everything is so siloed. There's data and bits of information, and you have the customer service group that's on the front lines, yet there's 5 other teams that have the data. And with the AI and technology jump, what you're really seeing is a platform that's bringing all of that data together in real time, and it's allowing some predictive analytics and how to engage with the customer. I think we're going to see a big shift in helping our customer and the experience they get. And I think, as you said, over time, jobs aren't probably going to be lost, but they're going to change, right? They're going to transition, and the needs of the employees to serve the company will be different. But I think it's going to be very disruptive and good for our customers.
All right. I think there's one more big elephant in the room, which is this hybrid work, right? And we all say, yeah, hybrid work, that's here to stay. We are in hybrid world. But hybrid workforce is not about just giving your people, a Zoom license or a Teams license. It's much more than that. And we did this research where we reached out to, a lot of employees as well as a lot of employers. And you can see the employees feel a lot more passionate about hybrid work than the employers, right? Employees, about half of them are saying, yeah, man, it's very effective, but only a third of the employers are saying that. What is this big challenge around hybrid work? Because I just can't, even if you look at these work from office mandates, I don't think they're working. Right? You can't mandate in today's world. So what's the biggest challenge, and how do we mandate? How do we manage it? Maybe Malcolm, if you want to get us going.
I'll really get us going. So I think when you look at employers, let me pick on them first. I think there's 3 big problems. One is they're lazy. It's a generation of managers that don't know how to manage virtually. And if you look at the data, it's quite remarkable that those who actually were good in-person managers are horrible as virtual managers. What's fascinating is vice versa. So there is a skill and a competency of motivating teams that might be remote, of engaging with people personally, and some folks are just horrible at it. So I think that there's a managerial capability and skill that a whole generation of managers is either resistant to, and they're not willing to go there. That's number one. Number two, you only need to look 2 blocks from here. JP Morgan is putting up a brand new headquarters. What did that thing cost? City Hall in New York has a terrible issue on its hand of the tax base, which is eroding because people aren't coming to the office.
Yep.
I was in San Francisco last week, and it breaks my heart. I love San Francisco. It's a ghost town now, downtown, and the budget gap has just blown wide open because of this issue. So these get back to office mandates are not driven by what's best for the associate. They're being driven by what's best for the organization or the municipality because of its graduated tax base, which now has huge fundamental problems. So that's an issue that we are starting to see between the associate and between the organization, which is not going to go away anytime soon. And so I think that you're going to continue to see employees voting with their feet. You know, if you look at PwC, PwC has embraced this. So Tim Ryan is actually now investing $1 billion to be a virtual first workplace. And I think they're going to reap the benefits of that at the expense of firms that just try to hold on with their fingernails to this old approach of work.
Yeah. Brent, how are you doing this in Raytheon?
It's tough to follow that. It's a great answer. At Raytheon, we've embraced it. Well, actually, we had 2 cultures that came together 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and one culture was remote, and one culture was not. And so we've gone through the growing pains and tried to designate employees, whether remote or hybrid or in the office. But where we've landed is a pretty good place that gives me a bit of optimism in that, you know, we have office space. We've made the office space more collaborative in nature, and there isn't a mandate, but it's purposeful presence. So go to the office when you need to. If you have strategy meetings, if you need to have an in-person whiteboarding session, you know, that's still probably studies over years would show that's your kind of, highest bandwidth when it comes to collaboration. But we've also embraced, working in Zoom, using more collaborative tools like Mural and Miro and whiteboards and things of that nature. But the key, I think, for us is we've not mandated back in the office, and it's helping us from a talent perspective in recruiting.
So no mandates are better than mandates.
I would certainly agree.
Yeah, Todd, how is it going with Verint?
It's good. The 2 biggest challenges I see in the market with this is the first one is companies are kind of waiting and seeing, or they're aggressively picking a side. And so I think as a company, you need a strategy, right? Do you want to be remote? Do you want to be hybrid? Do you want to be in person? Why? How does it fit with your culture? How do you align your employees? And then the second biggest challenge I'm seeing with companies today is how do you measure it, right? Mm-hmm. So what does productivity mean? And I think as one of the other panel members said, for managers of a certain generation, probably my generation, it was, well, if the person's here, they're productive, right? I'm sitting in the office next to them, which is not really a good productivity measure. So I think companies are going to have to figure out, how do you measure and make sure that your company's still going in the right direction and successful, but it's a huge benefit to the employees, to the morale, to driving that flexibility. I know in most companies, the 8 to 5 job is gone. Right, you're working all kinds of hours, so eliminating that commute, giving that flexibility to the employee, I really believe has made them much stronger and productive, which benefits your company.
Nalin, sorry, go on.
Sorry, it's funny that you said how do you measure it. I mean, that's one of the things that we kind of struggle with, but we're trying to get our arms around it. I mean, we've tried things just in the development world. When we finish a sprint, we have a happiness quotient, right?
Yep.
And it's just a really simple, thumbs up, thumbs down type thing. And I mean, we've found that if we can increase that happiness factor, we actually get more output because then the job goes beyond, just the activity that they're working on.
Yeah, and a lot of times for us, like we measure process, right? You have your key processes that drive your company. If you're measuring the output of the process, not a person, you'll see whether you're maintaining, growing, or improving.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Nalin, let me ask you this same question, but in a different way, right? So if you look at the IT and business services industry, we keep talking about EX, right? Employee experience. There's a lot of sound bites that we get. But if you look at this data, right, it's actually very poor. This is a study that we did in the Q4 of last year, so it's not that old. About 50% of employees, are actively looking out. Another 20% are saying, maybe I'm not actively looking out, but if some opportunity comes and presents itself, I'll jump. Right? So 7 out of 10 people are going to go away or want to go away, right? So the EX is really poor for our industry, right? As this chart sort of, I think, pretty much shows. Why is that, and what can this industry do?
Well, I think there are two levels, Saurabh, why it is poor. One is more immediate, which is, I think Malcolm referred to, but or you asked the question on hybrid. Hybrid is becoming a power struggle, a power dynamic. If the labor market is down, I can get more people to work. If the labor market is, supply is short and talent is short, I'll let them be remote. So, but it is not a question of the labor market and a power struggle, and that I think is playing on people's mind. That is one current reason why employee experience is poor. But there is a fundamental reason which is related entirely to our industry, and that is that the industry forever has been not focused on experience, has been focused on employee cost. Because this whole industry, no matter what we say, data, AI, all that, is essentially driven by FTE pricing, right? And it is driven by a gross margin cost plus price above that. In that mindset, we use words like rebadge, ramp up, ramp down, buffer. Employees are raw material. People have IDs, 5,491, The whole construct of this industry is not designed for employee experience. It is designed for a flow through supply chain. That's, I think, the fundamental reason. And until we think about that differently, and there are ways out of it, but right now nobody's thinking about that. I think that's the fundamental reason. And people can sense that. Malcolm and I were talking some days ago, and he shared something very interesting, which is that if you look at people, not at the executive committee and all those levels of these companies, but middle or lower level people, they have more affinity with colleagues in other companies than they have with your hierarchy. So they see each other as people of a profession, community, tribe, whatever you want to call it, not so much as employees of a company. And with 20, 30% attrition rates, you anyway have a new company every 4 or 5 years. So, this industry is not designed for employee experience right now, is my point.
That's a good point.
So Malcolm, what can we do for it?
Well, I'll pile on, because I agree wholeheartedly. And two sides of this coin. One is with the organization and HR. During the Great Resignation, there was a catch-22 where a lot of firms were unwilling to get that person the next certification or train them because, like, why would I do that? I'm going to spend the money and then they're just going to get recruited away. And so you got into this vicious cycle that was occurring there. A second is, I don't know what it is about our industry, but it's super, super boring. Meaning, most of these firms don't have personality and really rich culture, whereas in other industries they do. So just think of, you can name 50 of them. Harley Davidson, Starbucks, Nike, BMW. These are organizations that really stand for something and have an expectation, and it's self-fulfilling that people say, that's my tribe. I want to be a part of that. As opposed to, we just try to be all things to all people, and as a result, we're nothing to anybody. And that doesn't have stickiness. And when somebody's working at home, what is the friction of moving job. 20 years ago, there was enormous friction. You had to move city, you had to buy a house, you had to take the kids out of school, move away from your family. Now what do? You get a new laptop on Monday, there's no friction. So it's, I think that that's a problem. So I think that firms need to have the courage to make choices about their culture, to reinvest in their people, because as a final point, there's a headwind here, is that we're old fuddy-duddies on this stage, and our generation was by and large loyal to institutions. It was just in our DNA. But the next generation is not. They don't have a fundamental loyalty, so they're just going to look around. It's social media driven, and they're better dealing. This chart describes better dealing. 2/3 of folks are saying, I'm always looking for something else. I'm not going to be the fool to stay in a bad situation. And so, the bar is getting higher, and I think CHROs have to take that very seriously.
Yeah, no, I think on the loyalty point, there's another, the same study, showed that in our industry, only 11% employees are loyal.
Yeah. I mean, that's even whether it's the right question.
Fair
the
point.
whole idea of loyalty.
Yeah, fair point. I'll jump to this one and then come back to this. Another thing which I feel is sort of lipstick on a pig is this whole conversation on DEI, right? And here's a data point, and I'd love to get Todd and Brent, you into this, is, if you look at the technology and business services industry, right, they're only about 1/3 of them are women, right? And that goes even further down as you go to more senior levels, right? It drops down to less than 20%. And we are talking about, the top 15 services companies. This chart is based on, the likes of Accenture, Capgemini, EXL, Genpact, the top brands out there in our industry. I'm not even getting to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. So why do we keep talking about these things but do nothing about it? Is there a fundamental issue here? It's just hard, or peel the onion if you may. I know it's a difficult one, but we look at this panel. This is a manel, right? If Ruchi was here, we would have completely made that 20% number. But still. What's behind this, and how do you justify this, and what's the significance of this diversity, equity, and inclusion beyond just saying it? Brent, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this, we have initiatives in place to tackle it, but it really needs to become part of our purpose, right? It needs to be part of our vision. So that it can cascade down from leadership through to the folks that are actually hiring and interviewing. I actually think in a hybrid world, this should actually become, it may not correct itself, but it should become easier because there's a wider talent pool that you can go and look for folks. And I think we all need to be challenged to try to find folks that do not think like us, do not look like us, do not come from the same part of the world, maybe educated from different universities. We have to be committed to it every time we're hiring someone.
Yeah, and obviously this chart looks at just one angle of diversity, which is the gender. There's so many different angles. I was just trying to make a point, but it's the same story in however you look at it. Todd, what are you guys doing about it?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, right, it's to make real change, and as you said, not just conversation, it always comes from social and economic benefit and pressure for a company, right? If you look at the impacts ESG is now having on companies, right, potentially affecting their credit ratings or not, it's driving that change in behavior. And I think part of it too is your company culture, right? As you said, you can just say the words, or you can really put meaningful change in committees and governance in action and measure it. And the one thing I always find is once you start to measure something and you publish the measurement, it's amazing how fast change occurs. versus when you just talk about doing something. So I personally, in the last couple of years, think it's trending up. I think it's actually getting better. I think it's getting the visibility it needs. And that's across multiple different segments. You know, as you said, we're just showing men and women, but I mean, there's a lot of other opportunity areas there.
Malcolm, why do we keep putting lipstick on a pig? Why don't we just...
This is a great slide. And it tells, I think it gets to the core of the story. So look, in the US, 70% of valedictorians are women. Why wouldn't you just hire the best and the brightest? It's just not that hard. But you say entry level 45%, so we're close, mid-level 29, senior level 18. Something happens. And what happens is children. You know, this industry is such that it makes demands on all of us. You got to go to that client in Buffalo, take that red eye to close the deal. You know, it's get that deliverable out the door. It's going to be a week of 100-hour week. And so sometimes it puts incredible strain on people that interferes with your life. And men stink when it comes to carrying the load when it comes to family. It's just that simple. That's what happens on this chart. And that's where it breaks down. So that's the discussion that needs to be held. Now, why this is such a great slide, I think hybrid can break that logjam. I think hybrid can really help people live that scrambled egg life, where you're going to put in your solid 40, 50, 60-hour week, but you can fit some personal things in there. And so I think this is really, really important. And it's super important when you look, for example, in Silicon Valley, this is talk of the town, that some firms, when people are coming back to work, they're saying, is that going to promote bro culture further? Because the people that are coming back to the office are the men. And so you need to have as an organizational culture where you say, if you're virtual, you are peer level, and we're going to treat it that way in every way, shape, or form. So I've got some optimism on this, but you've got to get through those channels in the river, which are when people are in their 30s and have young children. How do they stay fully engaged in this industry? And I think hybrid work would really help with that.
So Nalin, I know your startup does a little bit of benchmarking around compensation, salaries, and all that. And again, there's another lipstick on the pig, which is, we keep talking about equal pay, etc. What's your data saying on?
The good news, bad news. So there's equal pay in that when you look job, person, you don't see a lot of distinction, but that's the good news. The bad news is what we were just talking about when you see velocity, because now we're applying AI to all of this job data, and you're seeing there are maturity curves. So let's just say somebody's an AWS architect. Where should they be year on year? And you will see this distinction where men will start to grab and women won't at the same curve. And it's in the compensation data, which I think is very related to this, of being able to make those trade-offs and getting promoted through those critical years of a career.
So just to build on that, Saurabh, if you look at a cohort, a large cohort, and within there, if you study gender pay equity, you will find in most companies that there isn't a significant problem. But when you then project a person's career over the years and impute a lifetime value, which is that this person, man, 15 years from now, what would be his cumulative wealth? This woman, 15 years from now, what will be her cumulative wealth? And then you start projecting that, that's when you start seeing the differences. And why you see those differences, there are many reasons. Some of them Malcolm pointed out, women dropping off at critical points. But also specifically in our industry, and I'm going to pick up this idea of boring, that's a rather strong word, but what you got here is the input metrics of diversity, the content. But the output of diversity, the goal, is actually innovation. Rich thinking, different disruptive ideas to the business, all of that. Unless that comes in our industry, people are not even attracted at the right level, at the senior most level, women, or any other diverse group, because our industry is very compliance-oriented, very SLA-oriented, and it does everything that a client wants, but there are 1,000 clients, So it is difficult to define a sense of purpose. You were saying, Harley Davidson, but even tobacco companies have a sense of purpose. We are here for choice. People believe it. When you're a product company, a soft drink company, you say refreshment and optimism is our purpose. People believe it. They walk around, Duane Reade, Walgreens, they see the product, they tell their families, this is where I work. Our industry has not yet been able to land on that. It has not been able to land on creativity. And unless that happens at the right level, diverse people will be reluctant to join.
Yeah. The other question, and I know this is a little bit of an eyesore chart, but let me explain it very easily. This is a demand supply on skills, right? So we asked, on the y-axis, we asked clients, what are the skills that you want? And on the x-axis, we asked employees, what are the skills that you're being trained on, right? And you know, if you look at the purple section here, that's the Goldilocks zone. That's sort of where demand and supply are more or less meeting. If you look at the orange or the yellow zone, that's the hot zone where there's a lot more demand but a lot less supply. And if you cut all the dots here, basically where the hot zone is in non-technical skills. You know, it could be things like social influence, problem solving, people management, you know, all those. There are a lot more blue dots than orange dots, as you can see, right? So that's the genesis of this. And I think, Nalin, if I could ask you, you know, this has been, you know, ever since I've been in this industry for more than 2 decades now, this has been an age-old question. You know, we want to move up the value chain, you know, we want to do this and that. But what about moving up the talent value chain, right? We just keep training people on, you know, here are my RPA developers, here are my cloud, you know, trained people. There are hardly any people who are trained on flexibility, as an example, right? It just, people smirk at that conversation. But that's what is required. So how do we move up the value chain?
I don't know, people in this room have more experience, but it's difficult to move up the talent value chain unless you move up the business value chain. If you look at our industry's growth, the revenue growth has been quite remarkable in double digits. But if you see the revenue per employee growth, that has been pretty much stagnant, which means that we are adding horizontally more business by hiring more people. But the value of each person is almost the same as, let's say, a few years ago. So it is difficult to move up the talent value chain when your cost per employee, revenue per employee, actually, if you factor in inflation, is in real terms even falling. So unless you solve bigger problems for clients, unless you solve strategic issues for clients, you don't need the people. The reason you have that middle pink band is because, you know, you do a certification, AWS certification in 6 months and you have some kind of a technical talent.
Yeah.
Right? But if you want to really solve a disruption problem that the insurance industry may or may not be facing, you need people who think differently. And we don't do that. That's all done by the client, and then they give us an order, and we fulfill that order with recently trained people.
Yeah.
So it's, unless you move up the economic value chain of your business, it's difficult to move up the talent value chain.
Todd, would love to hear your perspective on the skills ecosystem, because it's very fragile, and, you know, every 6 months we need a different suite of skills.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it comes down to, does the company have a strategy and then the programs in place, right? So often you hear about it, how do we train people? After the needs already existed, we're playing catch up, we throw a few people into it, you know, we say we have the skill set and we want to market it. I think, you know, it's a cross-functional team. You bring your HR organization together with the executives, what's your growth strategy, where are you planning to go? And then it's a commitment to spend. You know, you have to invest in and allow the employee some freedom in there, because, you know, what we're seeing as an example is we've purchased a bunch of courses for the employees to take. Some of them are aligned to our strategy today, some are not. But what we're doing is, by giving them the opportunity to learn, we're also challenging them to, what's a use case for this? How would we bring this to the market? And what we're seeing is some very innovative, the employees are really starting to drive some of the market dynamics. And I've seen 3 or 4 other companies now starting to do it. So it's really about commitment and investment to the future. it plays back into that card of the employee experience, right? We have IT people, what do they always want to learn, right? They want the newest and greatest technology. And I think by creating that balance of what's aligned to your strategy, but giving them some freedom, I think we're seeing some innovative and disruptive ideas.
Yeah. Brent, how is Raytheon creating the skills ecosystem?
Yeah, the challenging thing about skills is, especially in tech, they're always changing, right? And the pace of change is quickening. If I look at this board, there are a lot of sort of transferable or maybe even meta skills that there's a speaker this morning that talked about investment in people. And if it just matched what you had in tech. So, if you could circle those meta skills and invest and train your people and make sure they're good at problem solving, and maybe start to think about the outcomes that they're trying to drive, they're going to figure out the technology along the way. That's what we've been trying to do quite heavily, investing ourselves in the last few years within my group.
Yeah. And Malcolm, you've been doing a lot of research around this, both in your current life and your previous life. What's your take on this? Because we've not solved for this either.
Now, this is a great chart, but I'm just wondering, who's that nutbag client that voted on willingness to push back? Who's that masochist? Seriously, it's to relate back to the pie chart that you had before of why so many associates are not loyal and are looking elsewhere. I've often thought in this tech world, employees think of themselves, there's an analogy of being a stock option. And so it has a strike value, and is my value going to increase faster being part of this organization? So is this company, with all of its scale and vendor relationships, going to train me up and get me certifications and get me skills where I'm actually ahead of the market? And so that's the promise the organization needs to keep. And if it doesn't, then that associate is just going to say, I should go elsewhere. So I think it's moving faster than the marketplace. So when somebody wants to leave, you can say, well, you might get that 20% raise across the street today. But if you stay with us for the next 2 years, you're going to be worth 200% more. And if you could fulfill that, then I think it fits with that chart.
Yeah. So this is my final question, and then we'll get the audience to. But we've explored all parts of the earth now, right, to find talent, and we still have a talent shortage and a talent crunch. And how do you find more, right? I think the chances of finding a hidden continent under the ocean now are pretty much nil, right? There's a higher chance of finding aliens than that. So how do we solve this, right? And is it really a talent crunch, or is it a talent model issue? I don't know who wants to go first, because I don't have an answer to this. That's why I was asking you guys. Nalin, let's start with you.
You want to go first?
You can go.
Okay. Well, I think embracing hybrid will be a small step to solving the talent crunch, because not embracing hybrid is shooting yourself in this environment. But I think even before we think of the external market, because the way you position the question seems, how do we attract talent? I feel in this industry, there's so many smart people who are leveraged at 1/3 of their potential. If you just leverage your current talent, including the point that you were making, that if you stay with us, you will become marketable, and put them on the horns of a dilemma that every year I become more marketable, but I won't leave this company, because the year I leave this company, I'll become less marketable. So how do you make your people more marketable within the company? That's the only, because if you leverage your internal talent, you don't need the external market. How do you make them more marketable? And the answer there is nature of work. The kind of work that we are providing has to become better. How does that become better? Is the nature of business you get. You need to get more high quality business with all this talent. All the salespeople in this room, they're getting poor quality business, and then highly talented people are doing that poor quality business.
So the problem is sales, yes. Let's just blame it on them.
No, it's also the CEO's strategic thinking about how to get high quality business. So we can leverage our internal talent by providing them better work, by getting better work, and then we don't have to really worry so much about the external market.
Todd, how are you finding the continent?
Yeah, I think for us, it's having a series of strategies that evolve, right? You know, the big one that I see often, and my father-in-law was a college professor for 30 years, but it's you said, we're not gonna find a new continent, but as a company, you have certain needs, right? And working with the educational institutions, especially the higher learning ones, I've seen several companies develop programs within universities, which creates their own unique talent pool, right? We're training them in 4 years of school on the needs we have. We're developing them. They're growing. They're getting work coming out of school. So I think it's not finding that hidden continent, but it's the workforce that exists within those continents and not just all going to the same well.
Brent, have you had any luck?
I'm just trying to think of something that's additive, but it might be going back a little bit, but like we're a large organization. Like we need to make opportunities available to our employees to have some of those experiences that they might get if they go somewhere else. And not be penalized for it, not take a step back, maybe even make it more of a rotational place so they can come back into the units that they're working from that they like.
Yeah, so Malcolm, you need to give us the magic wand now.
There's no magic, but I think two thoughts. One, to reiterate what Todd was saying, there's no new continent, but let's go big to small. There's 5 million tech workers in the US and 5 million in India. I think both countries, you could at least on paper, double those. The US educational system, we got to stop teaching so much social studies and get to the serious work of STEM, but it could be done. But the second is getting to productivity through AI, and as Phil opened the day, 70–80% productivity gain. A lot of reputation has been lost in this industry in the last 30 years of managers trying to separate headcount from revenue. And as you were describing, it hasn't been done yet. But I think it can be done with generative AI. And just one final thought on that. At TalentGenius, we're going to be launching a resource directory of AI tools for knowledge workers. It'll be coming out in about a month or so. We've currently got about 2,000 tools in that library. If you just look at LLM or generative AI-based spreadsheets, we got 46. And if you work with these, you will never view the job of a business analyst the same way again. The work it would take somebody 3 days to set up a spreadsheet to sell a project can be done in 10–15 minutes. And so AI is going to eat a lot of work, and I think we may finally separate headcount from revenue with these new tools.
Hallelujah. Any questions from the audience before we wrap this up? Heather has a mic for you.
So one of the businesses that I work with, they are heavy tech, lots of developers. And one way that we find that's sort of an incentive is to have like a hackathon inside the company to solve a problem. Is that something that you think would be beneficial at your companies or that you do today? For those on the tech side? Yeah. Like a hackathon, like you have when it comes together to solve.
Yeah. At least at EXL, we've done quite a few hackathons and also with our analytics team, all of that in the past, yes. But the struggle that we then have is that, these work out well as events. But then does the fundamental nature of work change on a sustainable basis is where we are so client and assignment dependent that it becomes a nice event.
We've done the hackathons as well. We've also focused quite a bit on citizen development. And in the citizen development programs, we're creating kind of a mentor or coach to help the individuals either that are interested in learning or that show aptitude. So maybe just a step further than the hackathon.
So ours is a funny industry for last 30 years where the demand has always outstripped supply from a talent perspective. how come the rate for offshores are $25 an hour and on-site about $120 an hour? They've never gone up.
I don't know.
Why is that dichotomy?
Actually, the rates have not only not gone up, they have, at the entry level, in real terms, inflation adjusted, they have fallen. And the reason is very simple. It's simple economics that the supply of talent, especially in India, is higher than the demand. The demand for our industry is going up, but when you take the input which serves the industry in India, that supply is going up. I mean, it takes 5 months for somebody to become an AI expert under a school under a flyover in Hyderabad. So the supply is relentless, and that's why the price is down. And that actually has made, like Malcolm, I think, used the word, our leaders lazy because economic surplus is available to be had by just supplying people and not thinking innovation or technology. So that's the reason. The supply side is very strong.
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic answer. In fact, I would say the IT business services industry is perhaps the only industry where the rates have gone down and not up. They're not even inflation adjusted. Leave aside the value add. So that's why we're talking about talent. Right? So, but thank you, gentlemen. This was fantastic. We are out of time, but give it up for them. There's one more question.
So you have the mic.
Unless Alina disallows it, we'll have one more question.
Oh, sorry, I have the mic.
There were a few.
Okay. All right. So thank you. I think this is very enlightening. I think a lot of different perspectives are being expressed. Maybe it's talent, maybe it's diversity. And underlying everything is the culture, company culture, right? I want to understand, like, from your level, how would you address, because that's the fundamental thing you have to address. And all these problems are just that, from my perspective, it's just the symptoms, right? So how do you address as a culture? What exactly mean culture to you, and how do you address that?
I think culture is similar to a personality profile in a human being. So if you believe in Myers-Briggs or Big Five or those models, I think organizations, when they're aware of those, can pick, major in one, and that becomes their dominant, operating culture. But you said it really well. We're in this hybrid business that you're dealing with client A that has their own culture, client B has a different one, client C has a very different one, and so you become this chameleon because you want to reflect them so you can get scale relationships with them, and then you dilute the culture terribly over time. So it really takes, I think, strong leadership to define that and to have all of the organizational mechanisms of how do you promote, how do you train, what are the anecdotes that are told, what do you tolerate, what do you stamp out. It takes real clarity of vision, and very few firms have that because there is just this, the easy way is to become the chameleon because you just want to satisfy all of your clients, and in doing that, you get a very weak culture.
Don't be the chameleon, be the lizard. But thank you so much. Thanks, Nalin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. That was great. Thank you.